Series. Welcome to everyone online. Thanks for joining us. I am really excited today to welcome our guest speaker. I'm going to read a little bit about him so that you can get to know him before he dives into his talk. CHARANJIT Hundal is a practicing Sikh with 25 years of engineering experience. Mr. Hundal grew up in the Kansas City area, has called Kansas City home since 1972. His youth experience in the local schools and in his Boy Scouting days helped him to enrich his love for his faith. As a young Boy Scout Sikh, he paved the way for the next generation to enjoy the tremendous joy of belonging to this great organization while still adhering to his faith. Mr. Hundal got his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Rolla, Missouri. He was active in university diversity and ethnic clubs and led these clubs to be highly visible and participatory in university events. His career in software development has enabled him to establish roots here in Kansas City. He is active in local interfaith initiatives and was a founding member of Pathways, a local discussion group of several different faiths in Johnson County. Mr. Hundal has been a leader in the local Sikh community and works to ensure the local Sikhs are involved in interfaith and civic programs. Please help me welcome Mr. Hundal.
Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be here, to see everybody here, and also want to thank Kelly and the organization here for doing this initiative of education, of getting to know one another as neighbors, since we all probably live in the general vicinity of Johnson County or close by. So we're all neighbors, and we're also a diverse community, so it's always wonderful to see these types of efforts to just reach out and get to know one another. One of the things you learn is through life is once you sit down and talk to somebody, just sit down at a lunch table or something and talk to somebody, you realize that everything is pretty much the same. Your desires, your issues, your problems in life tend to be the same no matter what faith you're at. So we tend to be similar in that aspect. And we're all concerned about the same thing, about having a good life and enjoying our existence here on this earth in a manner that makes us happy and the community happy. So, and Kelly reached out about this last word discussions that you do have about what the last word would be in case, this was the last time that I would be meeting anybody on this world. And leading up to that, I think it kind of goes back to the prayer that you said, Creator God, in that prayer that we're giving thanks to, is that's what essentially, if we look throughout the faiths, that there is a Creator God. And in the Sikh faith, if we look at my faith, the very first thing that are gurus, and we had 10 gurus, and we have the eternal guru, which is the writings of all the gurus that are out there. The very first thing that it says in there is Ekankar. And Ekankar means one God. So the belief that there is only one God. And that kind of describes our whole teachings in the way we practice that there is one God. And we are all children of that God, no matter how we choose to practice our faith or which faith we follow. In the end, there's only one God who created everything. So Ekankar, one God. So the Mool Mantra, which is the first stanza of our writings, of the Guru Granth Sahib, Ekankar, one God, Satnam, truth is his name, Karta Purkh, he is the creator, which goes back to the prayer that you guys had, creator. Nirpal, he's the protector. Nirvair, he's without fear. Akal Murat, he has no enmity. He's the first entity that there ever was. This is a description of God. Ajuni Sabang, he's never born. Gur Prasad, he's self-perpetuating. Jap, with the Guru's grace. Ad Sach, true in the beginning. jugad such, true through the ages. Have be such, true even now. Nanak hosi be such. Says Nanak will be true in the future. So these are the descriptions of the Almighty Creator, that He's never born, and He's always there, and He's always true. In that philosophy of the Sikh faith, that everything revolves around that. And our whole Guru Granth Sahib, which is basically, if you look at your Bible, you have your scriptures in there, that kind of is the same for us. It is writings of our gurus, what they passed down, and all those 1,430 pages are what descriptions of God and our relationship with God, of what God would want us to be like, and what we really are as human beings, our egos, our desires, and how those are not always in sync with what God wants them to be, wants us to be as neighbors, as one another, going to learning about one another. The Sikh faith believes that since there is one God, and God is limitless, and He's not a God on this earth only, He's a God throughout the multiple universes out there. So it puts no limit on God. And because there's no limit on God, there's no limit on how you choose to follow to get to that God. The Sikh faith believes it is one way, and our faith teaches us that God is limitless, and how you choose to get to that God is your right, and God's way of saying that I have so much power that I cannot only show you one way of doing things, and that I'm not only on this earth. No matter where you go in the universes as we travel, I will always be there. And that kind of throughout life, in the Sikh faith of life, part of our practices, our faith, is that we always try to help one another. So as part of our services, we also have a religious service where we do sermons, people sing, people do other things. But then we also have a community kitchen. And what the community kitchen does is it helps you to go out and do service for somebody else. Puts you in this mentality of doing something else. So our faith in every aspect that has a spiritual aspect says, okay, there is something else beside the spirituality of it that you have to live your normal life. And in your normal life, I'm going to teach you to do things for others here in this facility so that when you're outside in the world, in your day-to-day life, you're thinking of those principles and getting your life to do things for others and not expect anything in return. God put you on this, He gave you this life. He's not expecting anything in return. He wants you to be a good person. And He wants you to be out there in society and be unique, but understand that everybody else is unique and respect that right for that other person to be unique in themselves. So we'll see in the Sikh faith, the Khalsa concept of the Sikhs. In every part of life, it is always two things. One is your spirituality. One is your sovereignty and your political aspect, your humanity in life. So it is always that we can apply our spiritual concept within, but we need to carry that outside in life and not be afraid to speak up. Not be afraid to take a stand against the oppressed, against people who are being wronged, that it is part of our duty to go out there in life and be involved. Even though it may not be something that it may be harmful to us in some ways or aspects, but it's our duty to go out there and help others in whatever aspect of life that we can to help them, because there are always wrongs in life no matter where we go. And so we cannot shy away from those. We have to be involved in those and try to get society to learn that good needs to be done. And we need to be good neighbors. And we need to be involved in life. And we cannot be so involved just in ourselves and worry about just myself and my family in life. That is not what God would want you to do. God would want you to be involved in external life also, besides your faith. We don't believe in that you should be a hermit. You should be meditate in a cave somewhere. That's not what God would want you to do throughout your life. If everybody in the world said, I'm going to go in a cave and meditate because I'm going to be the spiritual aspect, we could not continue. God made us so that we could not do that. We cannot survive without sustenance. We need to eat, we need to drink, we need to be out there. So yes, that is a part of life. Meditation, spirituality, and everything is a part of life. And in the Sikh way of life, throughout, as the Sikh faith evolved, as it came about, to put you in that practice, there are certain prayers in the day that you do. Our code of conduct says that in the morning, once you get ready and you shower, the first thing you do is you do prayers before you do anything else. So people get up in the morning, like myself, first thing I do, I shower, and I spent half hour, 45 minutes doing my prayers before I go to work, before I go do anything else. And so it teaches you that this is a process in life that's going to help you and help you focus on certain things in life. I don't want to get so involved in life that I forget my spirituality. I don't want to go think about working and I got to make money, I got to pay my bills, that I forget about that there is something else besides those things that we normally associate with life. So the Sikh faith believes that here's some ways that you can do that. We have prayers in the mornings that we do. Before we go to bed, we say a prayer. In the evening, we say a prayer. So always to get you to think that, hey, take time out for this. When we go out and in our services, like I said, we have a community kitchen, which is basically volunteer service. Somebody cooks, somebody passes out food, somebody cleans up, and it is a part of life. That you need to be doing other things. So there's the part where you learn to do your prayers, that's your spirituality. You're learning to do things for others in this small facility, in our facility, during the time, so that when you're at work, when you're out somewhere, hey, let me take time out to help somebody. Or if there's a problem in the world, and there's problems all over the world all the time, if there were not, it would be a perfect union between God and ourselves, and that just will not happen and has not happened for a long time, simply because we are human. God says we are human, we are egotistical, we have desires that drive us from what God would want us to do. And that's the challenge in life, is how do we come to a common understanding between ourselves, between our egos, our desires, and what we want to achieve in life, the good things, the good houses, good cars, where's the limit? Where do we decide that for ourselves, this is a limit and I'm happy with this and I'm content with what I have? And God says that if I will give you stuff to eat and shelter, and that should be enough for you, and then the others are your desires, is what you want. And that's where we have a challenge within ourselves. Within ourselves is, where do we get to that point within our lives to say that I have enough, that I can spend time in all aspects of my life and always think about God. And when I'm doing something, is this what God would want me to do in this one step that I'm taking at this point in time in my day, in my life? So that is the philosophy of the Sikh faith. It is that God is everywhere, and we are all praying to God, and we have different paths that we get to that one God. So, from the Sikh perspective, and I've kept it very, very short and just on the basic principles of the Sikh faith. Is there any questions or anything deeper that you'd like to go into?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
1 second, let me get the microphone.
I'm talking to microphone. You mentioned prayers.
Uh-huh.
Are they unique prayers, or are they prayers between you and God?
So the prayers are taking out everything in the Sikh philosophy are taken out of the Guru Granth Sahib. The Guru Granth Sahib is a compilation of the teachings of our gurus and other religious people at that time in history who wrote things that were aligned to this philosophy of one God and that were praying to the one God. So It was not only the founders of the Sikh faith themselves and the gurus ourselves, but there were other religious people at that time who had that same mentality, that same point of view, and their writings were included in the Guru Granth Sahib. So all the prayers are taken out of the Guru Granth Sahib. And over time, as any faith over time, as it evolves and administers itself, as determined as a faith group over about 150 years ago, they got together and said, okay, here's some standard prayers that we can do. And they selected the first, in the morning, they selected the ones at the very beginning, like the one I described at the very first stanzas. So in the morning, here's what you need to do. Here's the 3 prayers that you need to do in the morning. And again, they start from being in probably the first half of it. They took out certain prayers, writings out of the Guru Granth Sahib, and said, here, these are prayers. There's a standard prayer that everybody does in the services that we have, that we do in the evenings, right before, as the sun is going down. So that's the evening prayer. So you do that. And then there's one right before bedtime that you do. So here's the time. And these are standard prayers that are done in every gurdwara out there in the morning, in the evening, and then at night. And so you do the same prayers in your house or wherever you're at, to get you in the practice of saying that, hey, I'm taking time out, plus I'm learning what these prayers are. I'm trying to understand what these prayers are, so that I can, number one, start reading the Guru Granth Sahib more, because it's 1,430 pages. So I can, when I have time, I will, I want to take time out and read it, not just these 5 prayers in this time. So spend some more time and out of my life and say, okay, it's important that I take half hour, 45 minutes besides these prayers to go do that. So it's a way of number one doing, and number two, get you into a mentality of saying, okay, hey, I do these prayers and I still have time to do all my other stuff and do them, but maybe I can take some more time out.
But is there ever what I would call a personal prayer with God?
Yourself.
What your soul is saying to God.
What your soul is. So you can. That's what is called an ardas. So if I'm doing a prayer, if I suppose I do this prayer in the morning, and after I'm done with the prayer, I do an ardas. Ardas is a standing prayer and your personal prayer to God. Part of it is standard, saying here's a standard ardas, standing prayer that everybody does, no matter what service there is. And there's a portion of it where you do whatever you feel like saying to God at that time. So there's one place where you can insert whatever you want to say to God, and you for that time, for whatever, sometimes we just feel like doing a prayer because either something good happened or something bad happened, right? That's the one time we remember God. That's usually when we really remember God, right? Is really something really good happened or something bad happened. So at that time, we always go and we say, okay, here's, I'm going through this happy time or good time. Thank you, or help me out in this time. So yes, those that's what all faith is about. And that's when we personally go, and that's when our emotions come out and say, because we really either want to thank God or we want to ask something of God, is saying, hey, help me out.
Other questions?
I never know how to ask this question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Hold on. You got to ask it in a microphone, whatever it is.
What is your religion? Who was Christ, the person we call Christ?
Right.
What was he?
So in the Sikh faith, so if you look at faith as a very broad subject, you have your Abrahamic faiths, right? Abrahamic faiths are Islamic faith, Judaism faith, and the Christianity faith, the Catholic faith, right? So those all grew out of the Middle East, in that Middle East area, right? So they're all linked to Abraham. All of those faiths are linked to Abraham. Other faiths have no connection to that faith because they grew up somewhere else. Most of those tend to be the Hindu faith, the Baha'i faith, Jainism, Sikh faith also. So those faiths grew up in some other part of the world. Somebody had an idea, somebody had something, and people started following that. So they have no connection to the Abrahamic faiths at all on as far as any kind of heretical link or any kind of theology link.
So as a man,
Right.
Who started it?
was he a prophet or was he anything in the Sikh?
In the Sikh, as far as who,
Like who started it? Who was the beginning prophet?
So in the Sikh faith, there were 10 gurus. The first guru was Guru Nanak. He's the one who had the idea, we described the descriptions of God here, who came up with that prayer or that writing. So he had this vision that with God at that time. This was in India, what we now call India in the world, in that part of the world in 1400s, late 1400s. And so he had this revelation with a communication with God, and he said, here's what God told me, and he started spreading this message around. And then, like any message, people started following it. Then he passed on his leadership to somebody else when he passed away, and in his succession there were 10 gurus that we have, and the last guru said, okay, the faith is what we've tried to spread. It has spread around. There's no need for any human person to lead this faith, what we would call a human or a prophet or anything. Everything is going to be bestowed in these writings, and that is your eternal guru. That is going to lead you, and those writings are going to lead you in your life. You as a collective will make any kind of political decisions that we think of.
Not get it, Ted? Yes.
I have two questions. One is, when you do your prayers in your home, do you do it singularly or do you do it as a household? And the other question is this a faith that you adopted or were you born into it?
Okay. So the first part of your question is, generally as children are younger, you do it as a group because you're trying to teach your children. Your number one, the language is different than English. So you're trying to teach your kids, number one, to understand the language and also how to say it. So you do it generally as a family. Now, as you get older in life, and your kids get older and they have their own lives, you generally tend to do it as individuals. But that's just because of the way life works, right? So your kids go off to college or something else, or they're too involved with other stuff, so you can't set a timeline. You know, you say, okay, just like you can't set a time with dinner, right? As your kids are older, so you just have to adjust your schedules. So it kind of varies, but according to the Sikh faith, is every individual Sikh is responsible for doing it. Okay, it can be done in a group. You know, like I said, when my kids were younger, we used to sit down as a group and do it, especially in the evenings, because it's easier to do it in the evenings than, say, early in the morning before they go to school. So it just kind of varies. But you try to do it as much as you can within a group, but the faith says it's your responsibility as a personal member to make sure you get it done, however you choose to do it. And the second part of your question was...
Were you born into this faith? Yeah.
So the Sikh faith, most of the followers of the Sikh faith are born into the faith. And then the faith is passed on to your children and your future generations. Not 100% of the Sikh faith out there is that way. There are converts to the Sikh faith, whether they were Hindus beforehand, whether they were Christians beforehand, or Catholics. In the Indian part of the world, it's mainly going to be Hindus, Islamic people who convert over to the Sikh faith. The Sikh faith does not believe that we actually go out there and convert people. It is there, but we don't go out and do that as a practice. But people do convert, and that's fine, whenever they choose to. So for most of India, that's the type of people who will convert. In the Western world, it's usually going to be Christians or Catholics who convert. There was a gentleman in the 60s. He was a Sikh, born in Punjab. He was a Sikh, educated outside in the Western world. And he started this converting, starting a following and converting people. So they have, even in Kansas City, they have a facility here in Kansas City, and they're all converts of different faiths. Usually, since the U.S. is mainly Christian or Catholic, they're mainly Christian or Catholics, and so they've been here since the early 70s within Kansas City, and they still have a facility over in Midtown where they are converts, and everything to them. They do have the Guru Granth Sahib, but they usually do everything in English except for the main prayers. So there are those throughout the United States, the world, Australia, and stuff where they have converted to the Sikh faith. And a lot of those people, as they become followers of the Sikh faith, then they will go out and start attending services in say, a non-English based facility.
Beautiful. Another question? Yeah.
Is there a ritual that you have as your children go up in their spiritual life? Like we have baptism and confirmation. Do you have rituals that are done for those special times? And if people are converted, do you have a ritual that you do with that?
Okay, so the Sikh faith, one of the things about the Sikh faith was that because in that part of the world there was a lot of ritualistic religious practices. So the Sikh faith as a philosophy doesn't believe in rituals per se. Now they do have processes for what you're talking about is, if a convert wants to convert to the Sikh faith, what is the process for that? Huh? And it's the same for somebody born in the faith. So it's the same for any kind of practice in the Sikh faith is standard. I mean, it is not different for women and women. It's not different for somebody who doesn't follow the faith versus somebody who follows faith. It just applies to everybody as a whole. So the faith for somebody wanting to become what is called an Amritari Sikh, which is to the Sikh faith, when you become an Amritari Sikh, is your initiation into the faith. We're a little different from the concept of baptism. Baptism means you're now fully in the faith. To the Sikh faith, it feels once you've taken that, what you would consider baptism, you've now been initiated into the faith, and now you're going to start being a full member of the faith and learning about the faith and what it really means. So it's a little different viewpoint there. But that process is the same for everybody, is that basically there's sweet water that's prepared, and then there are 5 people who have been baptized who come who are Amritaris who have taken the Amrit, and they come and they pass that on to the new initiated people. And that can be done in the Sikh faith. Sometimes they do it as young children. Parents will do it as young children. Sometimes they won't do it, and as a child gets older, whenever that child feels like it, that they want to become Amritari Sikh, they will do that. So it's the same for somebody who wants to convert. They will go through that process of taking Amrit, and once you take Amrit, then you are initiated into the faith.
So many questions. I knew that the people would be excited. We'll go to this side of the room. John?
So as I understood it, you have 10 gurus that have given you the faith, right? There was 10. And when was the last of these people, and how did they decide it had been fully revealed by that time, and to go on then as individuals and groups?
Okay. So the founder, Guru Nanak, was born in 1469. And the guruship passed on to the Guru Granth Sahib was in 1704. So between 1469 and 1704 was when the 10 gurus were, and they evolved the faith and spread the faith. And then after that, there was the Guru Granth Sahib was the eternal guru, and the writings, the 5th guru, he compiled the writing of everybody beforehand into a standard text at that time, and the 10th guru added some other writings to the Guru Granth Sahib between those times and said, okay, there is no need to add anything else, and this is the final compilation. And in the Guru Granth Sahib, there's no teachings from the 10th Guru himself. He did not include anything of his, and he was a poet himself. He was, in life and in his history, he was considered a very good composer and writer, but he did not include any of his writings within the Guru Granth Sahib. So he took the initial compilation of it and added some more during the other times, and then said, okay, there's no need, everything is contained in here, what you need to do as a follower of the Sikh faith.
Justin, you had a question?
So how has your faith personally influenced how you live your day-to-day life?
So over time, we evolve, right? We all, throughout life. So as a young child, my parents taught me my prayers. My grandmother, maternal grandmother, was the one that really taught me most of my Sikh principles and in the language. So for myself, she was very influential in me understanding the basic things of prayers and what needs to be done as a young child, in elementary school and middle school. And so over time, part of it is, and I grew up here in the United States pretty much. I've been here since 1972, and I was 9 years old when I came. So for me, I am pretty much an American. If I look at my philosophy and things, I think more and more aligned with what we would consider American philosophy versus my parents. My dad has been here longer than I have. My English is better than my dad. He still has somewhat of an accent, even though he's been here longer, because he came as an adult. And my thinking, my way of thinking of how I live my life and what things are important to me are a little different than what his is, because his upbringing was in a different part of the world. So for me, going through that and learning that, and the struggles as an American, right? Everybody I am different. I am vastly different. If I'm in high school, if I'm in elementary school, I look different than everybody else. So because of the challenges I've faced, and no matter how much we say there's no bias or, nothing out there, there is always bias. Even today there is. But it's helped me to understand my faith so that when those things did happen, I was able to understand why, my parents chose that this is, even though they were living here, that we're going to follow our faith and why it's important to us. So because of that, I've tried to pass that on to my children. The way it affects me is that I get up in the morning, no matter, I used to work at 6 o'clock, when I was in software for a time. Just because of schedule. I had to pick up my son at 3 o'clock, so I need to start early. So I got up at 6 o'clock, used to work by the airport, so I had to leave by, an hour earlier to get there and park and do that when I was working. So, but I adjusted. I knew that I need an hour to do my prayers and do everything else. So I knew that I need to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning so I could do my prayers, get ready, and then get to work. And I made that effort, and I did that effort. It forced me to make that effort to say, okay, now, I like to sleep. I like to get up at 5 o'clock or 5:30 and get to work at 8 o'clock. But no, I need to get up in the morning. I need to make that effort to make sure I get up early enough so I have time to do that, because it's important to do that. So because it forced me to do that, I could have chosen not to do that. I could have said, okay, yeah, this is good. I'll just skip it. But I forced myself to do that because I needed to, because I got to take care of my family. I got to pick up my son from school at 3 o'clock. So, because it forced me to do that, it got me into habit of saying, I can do this. I can adjust my life to do this, and it makes me stronger. It helps me in that I'm understanding my faith more. It helps me that I'm doing a good thing, and then it also helps me to face challenges, to say, okay, this is what I need to do out of my life. So it keeps my focus on my faith, and it makes that just as important as getting to work.
Beautiful. I think we have time for, two questions.
Actually, I had two questions, but within the community, is there a prescribed way to raise up or designate
teachers or leaders within the community? And the second one is, what is the role of women within the community? How are they incorporated? Is there a distinctive dress? Are they given leadership roles? What is their role?
What was the first question? How leaders are done. So the Sikh faith within the Western world, we'll talk the Western world because that's where we're at right now, everything is volunteerism. Everything besides the actual religious part of it is all volunteerism. So we will take our next facility. We have a board which the congregation selects every few years for administration. I'm on the board right now, but it is volunteerism. So they do all the administration of the facility. We have hired people who do the religious aspect of it, but everything else, all the scheduling, everything is done by the volunteers. We have, like everything else, we want our kids to learn. So we have built classrooms. We have what you would call a Sunday school. That's all volunteerism. So students who have young children, or parents who have young children, they'll say, okay, I want my child to go to the Sunday school. So they'll volunteer their time to help teach those kids about the faith, about the language. So it's all usually women in the education part of it. It's usually the women who come and volunteer. Say, okay, we're going to volunteer to every Sunday to come here. And, as their children grow up and they get busy in life, they'll volunteer for maybe 5, 6, 8 years, and they'll move on because they're busy in life. So it's usually going to be people who have, in that aspect, who have kids, or they're older and their kids are gone, so they have the time to do it. In other different aspects, like in the kitchen of it. In the kitchen, it's usually men who do the cooking. Kind of weird, right? So, but it's usually the men who do the cooking. So they volunteer in the kitchen mainly. So they do all the cooking and you can imagine these 5, 6 people and there's no set criteria who's going to do it. That it just people show up. Every Sunday they cook a meal for 300 people. And I'm not talking just a small meal. They have a 5-course meal for 300 people. So these guys come there in the morning and they get it done. So it's just whoever wants. Certain people like to do certain things. There's no set criteria of that this is required to do it. Generally, it's if you like cooking or if you like doing something, you usually gravitate toward that and volunteer time for that. So that's usually how it ends up. And like I said, for teachers, sometimes we'll ask some of the teachers, maybe in high school, in some of the outside who do have experience in teaching, is, if you can do volunteer in the school, but it's usually just parents who do it, who end up doing it. So that's generally how the most places they will work. Very few places. There are few places in the U.S. who have an official school, and they've hired people to run those schools. But 90% of the facilities are just volunteers out of the congregation who come out, whether it's the Sunday school, whether it's the cooking, whether it's the passing out of the food. They just like doing it, so they come out and take the time out to do it. And that's what's important to them. And the second part was?
The role of women.
So the faith, and I'll give you 2 answers on that. The faith says there's no distinction of who can do what. It does not say who can be baptized. It doesn't say who can do the baptism, and I use the term baptism loosely. Amrit is the term that we use in our faith. So that's what the faith says, is that there's no restriction of a woman leading a congregation, being the religious elder, to use that term, of the congregation. So the faith says that women have every right of reading the Guru Granth Sahib, of leading sermons, of any aspect of life. The faith does not differentiate. Society, and we live in society today also, and society does differentiate, even in today. Even in the U.S., society, we know that the pay of women and the pay of men is different. Even in today's world, there's about a 15% difference. So society does discriminate. In society, where the faith is mainly based, is in India, which is a patriarchal society. And they do segregate in that society. And that's where a lot of the congregation of the Sikh faith, even here, are back from there because that's where they grew up and that's where they came. So they've always been in a society which does segregate between sexes, in which does say women can only do this, men can only do that. So some of them, that's just the way they were raised and that's their mentality. So the reality is that the faith says it can't do that, or the faith says it can do that. The reality is that in practice it does not always work that way. And even in leadership roles of women, we'll talk Kansas City here, within our administration, it's a board, right? Board elected of the congregation. Usually, you're going to have 50% women, 50% men in any congregation. So in our history, we've had very few women on the board. 2 reasons. One, women just don't want to be there because they don't want to be with, X number of different men in a setting. So society, even if they want to be there, they just feel so uncomfortable being in that situation that they will not participate. We've had some women in our board, and we're talking administration. We're not even talking the religious aspect of it. There are gurdwaras in the U.S., one in California, which usually has a majority woman board, because they've gotten into that routine of say, yes, we can do that, and the congregation has helped them to get there. So that's the reality of it, that that there is some of that even though there's no restriction on it, the reality is that even if I wanted to, every year I think I'm going to put one woman on. Though you can't put one woman, you have to put 2 women, and it's so hard to get one woman to agree that you can't get 2 women to agree. And I understand that. I understand where the women are coming from, from that aspect. I understand where they're coming from, but it is a struggle. We would like to do better, definitely do better.
Thank you for that honest answer. There was one last question that I had promised, and then we'll need to close it out.
I was wondering about the significance of your head covering, if you could explain that.
Sure. So the Sikh faith believes when we are in our Gurdwara, which is what the terminology we call our worship center, and Gurdwara means, is made up of 2 words, Guru and Wara. Guru means somebody who's going to take you from darkness to lightness. So Gu is dark and Ru is light. And then Wara means house. So it's the house of somebody who's going to take you from darkness to light, is essentially what the meaning of the word Gurdwara is. So within the Gurdwara, we have 2 practices in the Gurdwara, the main sanctuaries that are followed throughout in every Gurdwara. So one is you remove your shoes, and the second is you cover your head. And that goes back to the philosophy that we have 2 aspects of life. When the faith started in India, only the royalty at that time got to wear a turban. Nobody else could wear a turban at that time. That was a sign of royalty, is that you had a turban on, you were of the royal class. You were the elite. So the founder of Guru Nanak said, in God's eyes, everybody is royalty. God does not have a royal class or a non-royal class. He has only a royal class. So he said, everybody in my setting, in my darbar, when they come to see me, will be wearing a turban. And everybody that comes over time, the turban itself, the Sikh philosophy believes that God gave you a form. He gave me this here. He gave me everything. So if God gave it to me, who am I to decide that I don't want it? If God gave me this thing, then let's keep it. So the Sikhs don't cut their hair. Sikh philosophy believes you don't cut your hair, it's God-given. So the turban became a way of keeping the hair up, keeping it under control. And the turban was a message that we are all royalty. So now when you become an Amritdhari Sikh, you have 5 things, 5 articles of faith that you must wear. One is the kesh, which is the hair. A kanga, which is a comb. And it goes you the length they went to make things, let you understand that things need to be practical. A comb is to keep your hair in control. You can't keep your hair and not keep it combed until you get all matted. Because at that time, there were people out there, religious people. If you're really religious, you did not wear, you had long hair, but you never combed it. So God said, our founder said, hey, I'm going to give you a comb that you keep all the time, and you keep your hair under control. Kada, which is basically a bracelet you wear on every time. To remind you that life is a circle, and it's an evolution, you know. No beginning, no end. I can't tell where this bracelet starts, where it ends. I don't control when I come onto this earth. I don't control when I leave this earth. And so I should remember that, and I should also think whenever I do some act that, hey, maybe I'll look at this, or maybe I'll hit my wrist, think, well, what am I doing? Apna kashera, boxer shorts. And again, it goes back to that time in history, and even today, people who in India who are considered really religious don't comb their hair and they don't wear clothes. So God said, okay, I'm going to make you wear boxer shorts all the time. You're going to be religious, but you're going to be a person of the world also. And then the kirpan. Kirpan is essentially a small sword. He said, I'm going to remind you that you need to protect others, that you need to help society, and if the time ever arises that you need to do something, I'm going to give you something to protect yourself.
Beautiful. Can we please thank our guest so much for coming?
Thank you.
It was just elegant and honest and so intriguing. It's so much that was strikingly similar to what we believe as Episcopalians, the balance between contemplation and action and caring for others, really just really, really lovely. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to those online for joining us. Thank you, Justin, for helping me with lunch today, and everyone who brought soup today. We'll need more next week if you want to bring some. Next week we have Wallace Smith, who is the pastor at First Baptist Church here in Kansas City, and he will be answering the same question. What is his final word to put out into the world? So thank you all very much for joining us.
Can I say one thing before you leave?
Oh, yes, please.
So in the Sikh faith, Vaisakhi is very important from a religious practice, kind of like Christmas is in Christianity. So our Vaisakhi celebration is coming up the last weekend of April. Oh. And Saturday is the big program. And in that we have what's called a Nagar Kirtan, which is a walking parade. So we have a walking parade, we have food, and then we have games for children. So it's basically a carnival type event. So I'm going to invite everybody, and it's on April 29th. April 29th will start at 11 o'clock. So, and I'll send Kelly, once we finalize everything, I'll send her something. But come out and see our congregation and just mingle.